Hi, I'm David Nava, a lead solution engineer at Salesforce and a 14-time certified Salesforce professional. I passed all my certifications on the first attempt, including Platform Developer 1. In this short video, I'm going to share with you the study strategy that I use to pass the admin exam, which can be applied to most other Salesforce certifications. Before we dive into the strategy itself, I want to highlight what the intent of this presentation is. This presentation is not what to study for the Admin 201 exam, and it is not the definitive strategy for passing the exam. What the presentation is how to study for the Admin 201 exam, and it's one possible strategy for passing. And I want to highlight that last bullet, one possible strategy. There's obviously many ways to study, and you should absolutely develop your own method. Think of this presentation as a list of best practice tools that you can choose from to create your own personal study toolbox. Not everyone has the same learning style. You need to determine what your predominant learning style is and add the appropriate tools from this presentation to meet those needs. For example, your predominant learning style may be visual with respect to video. If so, instructional videos may be your go-to learning medium. Or it could be visual with respect to text, in which case knowledge articles, notes, and technical guides may be best for you. It could be hands-on. So a DevOrg or a Trailhead sandbox, also known as a playground, could be what you need to use. Or it could be auditory, in which case podcasts and other audible learning sessions could be helpful. More than likely, it's a combination of one or more of these styles. Not everyone has the same study style either. You may study better during short focus periods, or it may be long periods. It could be morning or evening. You may need background noise or absolute quiet. In a group, with a buddy, or solo. Establishing an effective study strategy not only depends on what you study, but when and where you study it, and with who. So give some thought to your preference for study style. It'll help you learn faster and recall test content with more accuracy. These are the areas where you'll need to perform well to pass the exam. I'll explain each briefly here, and then I'll be devoting a slide or two to each concept. Hands-on knowledge. In the questions that will be asked on the exam, Salesforce is going to expect you to think through how you would configure an org to meet various business requirements. This means you'll need to think through a series of configuration steps in your head to arrive at the logical conclusion. The best way to obtain and retain this type of information is hands-on. In other words, actually performing the configuration steps in a DevOrg or a playground instance. Moving on to memorized knowledge. Salesforce will expect you to have certain information memorized cold, such as limits. For example, you can only have 25 roll-up summary fields per object. Limitations. For example, you can't delete records with Process Builder. And platform feature capabilities. For example, you can create two types of sharing rule, owner and criteria-based. We'll talk about the best way to approach memorizing all these facts later in the presentation. The ability to analyze scenarios. Many of the questions on the exam are scenario-based and present a use case to introduce a business problem or requirement. You'll need to analyze the business problem and sort out which facts are important and which are fluff or distractors. You'll also need to identify the keywords that Salesforce uses, which may change the nature of the answer that they expect. These questions can be difficult, and you'll need to be well-versed in how to answer them correctly. Moving on to time management. Per the exam guide on Trailhead, you'll have 105 minutes to answer 60 multiple choice questions and score 65% or better. In other words, you need to get 39 out of 60 questions correct. That works out to 1 minute and 45 seconds per question. Now this sounds like a lot of time. However, some questions require you to select multiple choices correctly to get the overall question correct. For example, choose 3 answers out of 5 that meet the criteria. If you miss any of the 3 required answers for this question, it is marked as incorrect, and there's no partial credit awarded. There are 5 non-scored questions that Salesforce uses to try out new test questions. The material in these questions may be new to you and therefore not in your study material, so they may take you longer to answer. And as mentioned, there's a lot of scenario-based questions which require extra time for you to analyze and deduce the correct answer. And then finally, resilience. There comes a time in every test when you've stumbled your way through the past 4 or 5 questions, which you don't even know if you answered correctly, and the evil seed of doubt begins to creep into your head. We'll talk about what you can do to get past this point and not let it derail your certification success. Let's break each of these topics down, starting with hands-on knowledge. There are several methods for getting hands-on experience. Trailhead is where many people start, and there are several great trails that you can set as a favorite and complete to build your muscle memory for how to configure an org. The trails on the screen are those that are most commonly recommended, listed in the order that they should be completed. There's also trail mixes, which are trails created by Trailhead users like yourself that you can search for and complete. The content will largely probably be the same. I would argue that as fantastic a learning asset as Trailhead is, simply completing the trails may not be enough exposure to the platform and to the way in which Salesforce structures its tests to pass the exam. It's a great starting point for your studies. Another fantastic way to improve your hands-on knowledge is by signing up for a free Developer Edition org, which is similar to a Trailhead playground, and then using it every day to create solutions. Set a habit pattern to devote 30 to 60 minutes per day to building your dev org. This will help you pass the exam, make you more technically proficient, and impress hiring managers and recruiters because it shows you're passionate about Salesforce and about continuous learning. I recommend you build apps to manage some of the tasks that you're currently using the App Store or Google Play apps for. For example, build an app to manage your finances, to record your workouts, to manage your to-do lists, etc. It's also great prep for the next cert, Platform App Builder, which dramatically opens up the Salesforce platform to you because it teaches you how to automate processes and build apps. Let's move on to memorize knowledge next. There's no getting around it. You'll have to commit specific facts to memory, and you must be able to recall them for the test. If you're like me and need a little help in figuring out what facts to memorize, there's options. There are several third-party vendors that provide certification prep courses and practice exams for a reasonable price. In the following slides, we'll examine each of these vendors. Separate from the companies that provide a professional-grade study resource for a fee, you can also find free resources online. We'll briefly discuss these and why I can't recommend them. Please note this is not an exhaustive list. I've only included the vendors that I've personally used or have heard good things about. A study technique that I use to ensure that I've mastered the material for an exam is to first complete one or more of the courses that I'll be discussing in the following slides. And then once I've finished all the course material, I'll begin a phase of taking practice tests. These mock exams can also be purchased from the vendors that I'll be discussing shortly. After each exam, I record the score, study my weak areas based on the questions I missed, and then I take the next exam. I repeat this process until I achieve an 80% or better average. First up on our third-party vendors list is Mike Wheeler Media. You can find Mike's material in one of two places, udemy.com and his own website, Mike Wheeler Media. The admin exam content on both sites is kept up to date for the latest release. If using Udemy, be sure to Google Udemy coupon codes. You can usually find one and save a few dollars per course. If you're using his website, he charges a subscription fee per month or year, which can be a bit pricier than Udemy. I believe he does offer a free 7-day trial if you'd like to try before you buy. And in addition to all the admin content, you do get access to other content for other tests as well. I like his content because it's primarily video-based and offers a great baseline of the topics that you'll need to master. I recommend completing his course and practice tests and then moving on to focus on force. There are also free Pluralsight weekends, which are great for taking a class or two to cement your understanding of key concepts before taking the exam. If you're not aware, Pluralsight is an online education company with Salesforce and other courses and content, which is available for a subscription fee, except of course for the free weekends. The free weekends are usually announced in social media like Twitter, LinkedIn, and other platforms. The content on Focus on Force dives a bit more into the weeds. As such, it takes your platform familiarity to the next level. The Focus on Force admin course content is primarily text and image based. There are several advantages to using Focus on Force. The biggest one, in my opinion, is that the practice tests feature two types of test mode. You can choose to receive the answer and feedback after every question or after the exam. I choose the former because links are provided to the Salesforce Help and Training website for every single missed question. This is a gold mine. My recommendation is that you choose the option to receive feedback after every question and you copy the Salesforce Help and Training website links into a spreadsheet. At the end of every test, use your spreadsheet to access each of the links and read the content thoroughly. This is training you to overcome your weak areas and will help you immensely on the exam. Do this for every test. Later, when you think you're ready to take the exam, spend 2 to 3 hours reviewing all the links from all the tests to give your weak areas a final look. Take the opportunity for each question to explain to yourself or to your study partner why the correct answer was correct and why the other answers were either incorrect or not as correct as the best choice. This enables you to develop a much better understanding of platform capabilities and limitations. If unable to do this, leverage a focused search on the Salesforce Help and Training site to fill in the blanks. Focus on Force also offers a free 40-question exam. This link can be found on the Focus on Force website. There's a lot of great resources online to study for your Salesforce Admin 201 exam. Many of these resources are 100% free. However, there is a risk associated with any study resource that isn't released by Salesforce. It could be incorrect, out of date, or not representative of testable content. When you purchase content from a professional creator and curator, such as Mike Wheeler Media or Focus on Force, you can be reasonably sure that it has been updated for the current release, contains few if any errors, and mimics what you might see on the exam. This unfortunately cannot be said for the hundreds of people who have thoughtfully placed their study materials online. They may not be actively updating and curating their content. Then again, their content could be 100% up to date and exemplary. The point is, can you be absolutely certain which is the case? Unless you know for certain, don't take risks with your study strategy. Stick to official Salesforce content such as Trailhead, the Salesforce Help and Training site, and/or go with a professional study resource vendor. The Salesforce Help and Training website is one of the best Salesforce study resources in existence, in my humble opinion, which is why I'm spending time to discuss it and giving it its own slide. As mentioned, Focus on Force practice exams will provide you content-specific links to this site when you miss a question. This is so you can enhance the areas of your platform knowledge that may be lagging. But don't just use this site when you miss a question. Use the search bar to find additional information on any topics that you're unsure about. The Help and Training site literally has all the answers to the test questions. However, it's a vast resource that operates kind of like a wiki, so you can't read it cover to cover like a Salesforce user manual. Use it when you have content-specific questions or need to dive deeper into a feature or other aspect of the platform. Now that we've covered the requirement for memorizing knowledge, let's discuss the next requirement, the ability to analyze scenarios. This is arguably the most difficult aspect of the test. If not prepared for adequately, you could spend too much time on scenario-based questions, putting yourself in a position where you need to rush. This is never comfortable and can lead to mistakes. Let's go through each step on the slide. Step 1. Read the question slowly and carefully. Look for modifier words, content words, separate the important from the trivial. Look for repetitions. Step 2. Read the question again. Step 3. Read all the answers. Don't just select the first answer that appears correct. Use the process of elimination to narrow down the choices. Step 4. Make a selection, even if you have to guess. Step 5. If you're not positive, select Mark for Review. You can then access these questions that you're not sure about at the end of the test and review them all. Now, modifier words can easily trip you up if you're not paying attention. I use them to refer to words that change the meaning of an expected answer for the question. Examples include choose to, not, do not, except, which of the following are true, always, never, only. You get the point. Look for these, and if you see them, reevaluate the question in the context of the modifier word. Context words are clues and help you answer the question if you can spot them. I use this term to refer to words that hint at the functional area, feature, setting, permission, etc. being queried. Examples include automate, share, permission, parent-child, custom standard object, etc. Salesforce will often include extra details in scenario-based questions that seem to provide context, but aren't essential in understanding what the question is really asking. This is trivial information. Separating the important from the trivial is an important skill to develop. In step 1, by repetitions, I mean content that may have been described more than once in the exam. Sometimes you'll be asked a question early in the exam, and content relevant to that answer will be described later in the exam, or vice versa. Be on the lookout for these repetitions, as they can sometimes help you answer one or more questions. So, how do you get good at answering scenario-based questions? By answering a lot of scenario-based questions. Practice tests are one of the most important study tools in your toolbox. During my preparation for the Admin 201 exam, I took over 20 full practice tests. I recommend you do the same. Over time, you'll innately understand what is trivial, what is important, you'll recognize the modifier and context words, and most importantly, you'll be able to do it quickly. Remember, this is a timed test, and you'll need extra time at the end to review answers that you're unsure of. Examples are always helpful, so let's take a practice test question and break it down into its components to demo the question analysis process. Here's a sample scenario-based question that I borrowed from the internet. It's similar to what you'll see on the test in both content and format. Please take a moment to read it thoroughly as well as all of the answers. Now, let's break it down and examine it through the lens of modifier, context, and trivial or distractor words. Modifier words are in red. The question makes it clear that we only want answers that are true, and we need to select at least two answers. Watch out for conjunctions like and that change the meaning of the sentence. In answer A, are we positive that approvers can receive and respond to approval requests via email? Also watch out for absolutes like always, never, all, and none. Answer B is a good example and uses always and all. Are we positive that the record is always locked for all users? Be on the lookout for words that limit and delimit, such as any and only. We can see these in answers C and D. In answer C, are we positive that only users can be assigned approval requests? And in answer D, is chatter really an option for any standard or custom object? Moving on to context words. These are in green. Scanning the question tells us that the overall focus of the question is approval processes and that we're approaching our analysis of the question from the point of view of a system administrator instead of some other user. Scanning the answers reveals that we need to pick out true statements related to methods for requesting approval, as mentioned in answers A and D, assignment of approvers, as mentioned in answer C, and record locking within the approval process, as mentioned in answer B. This helps us further focus our thought processes. Next, we take a look at trivial words in blue. Is it essential to know that we're dealing with the finance department or that the approval is for paid time off requests? Probably not. So we discard this information and we don't spend any additional time considering it further. You can see how scenario-based questions can take a while to read, analyze, and choose the correct answer or answers. This is why it's essential that you practice. Take lots of practice tests. Incidentally, if you're wondering what the correct two answers are, they're A and D. This leads us to the topic of time management. If you've studied properly, you should have plenty of time to finish the test in the allotted time. It can be tempting to submit your exam once you've answered all the questions. You're likely tired of analyzing and answering questions, and you're anxious to see your test results. Resist the urge to click the submit button. The choice you make here can mean the difference between failing and passing the exam. It is not uncommon to fail the exam by one or two questions. Now that you've had the opportunity to answer all the questions and are familiar with the test's content, take the opportunity to review your answers. You'll find that you made mistakes either because you were stressed and felt rushed, maybe you missed the intent of a modifier or context word, or perhaps you didn't thoroughly read the question and all the available answers. Now, if you only have a few minutes remaining, review all the questions that you marked for review. These are the ones that you're most unsure of, and as a result, they are the questions with the highest likelihood of being incorrectly answered. Search again for the modifier, context, and non-trivial words to make sure your analysis was correct. Review the answers again and ask yourself if any of the answers you didn't select could be true. The intent here is not to second-guess your answer. It's to re-examine the question from a fresh perspective without any preconceived notions of what the correct answer should be. To do this, ignore the answer you initially provided and begin the question analysis process we discussed earlier from scratch. If your reevaluation changes the answer you provided initially, make the change on the exam and move on to the next question. If you have more than a few minutes remaining, use the process we just talked about to re-examine all of the test questions. This is no doubt a painful process. Stick with it. It's much less painful than repeating the test. If you've been able to review all the test questions and you still have time remaining, spend a few minutes to memorize any questions you're unsure of. If you don't pass the exam, record the content of these questions on a piece of paper or your phone after the proctored exam is complete and you've left the testing center. You will have preserved some of the areas that you're weak in, and you can use this information with your restudy plan. Finally, I want to speak briefly on the topic of resilience. In the beginning of the presentation, I listed it as a requirement for passing the test. It absolutely is. Even if you study for the exam and are fully prepared, the test could and usually does throw you a few curveball questions. This has the potential to shake your confidence. Doubting yourself and whether you are ready to take the exam is a slippery slope. Don't go down it. If you let the doubt take over, you'll begin second-guessing yourself and will likely do worse on the exam. This phenomenon can occur at any point during the exam. It's essential to understand that it's totally normal and happens to everyone at some point. For me, it usually occurs during the first 20 questions of every single test, and I always do better than I think. If and when it happens, take a quick 15-second break. Take some deep breaths, whisper your favorite self-motivation mantra, and keep going. As mentioned, you should have time at the end of the exam to revisit your answers, so don't worry about those curveball questions right now. You're going to take another look at them and get them straightened out once you've finished answering the other questions ahead of you. In a nutshell, here is the consolidated process that I recommend for preparing for the exam. Remember, this is a process. There are other processes that, based on your unique learning and study styles, may work even better. If this process works for you, great, use it. If not, then use this presentation and its related resources to come up with an exam preparation process that does work for you. The whole point is, have a process. Don't study for the exam in an unstructured and haphazard way. Otherwise, your exam results will absolutely reflect this. So, let's review. Step 1. Read the Admin Exam Certification Guide and know the exam focus areas. Know what you'll be tested on and which focus areas have the most questions. Step 2. Complete the admin trails on Trailhead. Build muscle memory by configuring in your Trailhead playground or developer org. Step 3. Access content providers for structured courses and practice exams. Complete as many exams as you need to achieve an 80% average overall. Keep track of the questions that you miss, these are your weak areas, and review these periodically. Use the Salesforce Help and Training site to dig deeper into each of these study areas. Step 4. Take the Salesforce Administrator Certification Practice Test. Use this as a litmus test to determine whether or not you're ready for the exam. If you get greater than or equal to an 80%, go for it. If not, keep hitting the books. Your overall big picture strategy should take into account the following steps. Develop an exam preparation process and timeline, i.e., how you will study and how long you'll need to prepare for the exam. Then, create your study plan. This is the when and where you'll study. Then, schedule your exam based on your timeline. Stick to your preparation process and your study plan. Don't compromise your study time. And then finally, take the exam. Notice that I recommend scheduling your exam even before you begin studying. How is this possible and why should you do this? If you've reviewed the Admin Certification Guide and have mapped out your preparation process, you'll know approximately how long it'll take to become exam ready. Scheduling the exam at this point acts as a forcing function, which helps motivate you to stick to your study plan. Without a deadline looming over you, it's very easy to put off studying until tomorrow. This is a common occurrence and results in procrastination. Scheduling the exam doesn't allow you to procrastinate. And if you grossly underestimate the amount of time you'll need, simply reschedule the exam. It's easy to do. If you don't pass the test, don't worry. Don't think of it as a failure. It's really not. Instead, think of it as a very realistic practice test that you included as part of your study strategy. Salesforce will immediately send you an email with your results, which includes section-level feedback. This feedback will highlight your weak areas, which you can use to study for your retake. Note, you also get section-level feedback after you take the official Salesforce Admin practice exam. This is a phenomenal study aid for fine-tuning your knowledge before the test. Don't wait to reschedule your test. The knowledge from your studies, as well as which areas of the test you're unsure of, are still fresh in your mind. Capitalize on this and schedule your test for 1 to 2 weeks out. Base your new exam date on how many areas you scored below 65% in. If you scored low in multiple areas, push your exam date a few more days out. These are the areas that you'll be studying during those 1 to 2 weeks. Keep taking the test until you pass. As the slide mentions, no one cares how many times you failed the test, only that you passed it once. As an example, here is the section-level feedback from my Platform App Builder exam. Had I failed it, I would have focused on the app deployment, reporting, and data modeling and management areas, as these were all within a few percent of passing. If you do pass the test, utilize the opportunity to strengthen your personal brand to market your new skill set. You're a Salesforce certified professional now, and should be informing your professional network of this achievement so you can capitalize on opportunities for employment. Your first stop should be LinkedIn so you can post the news to your network. Be sure to select the option to share the post on Twitter as well if you have a Twitter account. Include a picture of your certification, as images draw increased interest to posts in general. Use hashtags and app mentions to increase your post exposure. You'll also want to update your LinkedIn profile. Include a Salesforce Certified emblem in your background picture. Add Salesforce Certified to your headline. In the About section of your profile, add the fact that you're now a Salesforce Certified Admin. Include a picture of your certificate in the Featured section. Add your certification to the Licenses and Certifications section. If you'd like to see examples, please feel free to check out my LinkedIn profile. Finally, update your professional resume so it's ready to apply for jobs. The next few slides include all the resources I mentioned during this presentation, plus a few more. I'm going to skip through them fairly quickly because you'll be given all the links on these slides in a separate document which you can find in the description section of this video. This particular slide has links to all the trails, as well as the Admin Exam Study Guide, and a link to create your own Salesforce Developer Edition org. On this slide, you can find the link to the Salesforce Who Sees What video series. There's numerous videos in this series, and I recommend you watch them each several times until the concepts become clear. It's especially helpful for security and permissioning. There's also a link to the Salesforce Help and Training site, as well as a link to the Salesforce release notes. Note that you'll need to select the most current Salesforce release version from the drop-down menu. Additionally, you can find instructions on this slide for how to register for the Salesforce Practice Exam, which I highly recommend. Certification Days is when Salesforce offers free webinars with Salesforce certified trainers who review the key content and concepts for a Salesforce exam. The sessions can last from several hours to a full day and offer the opportunity to brush up on exam-related content and ask questions prior to taking the test. Sessions are offered for various exams, including the Admin 201 exam. I highly recommend that you sign up, and you can always participate in more than one session if you'd like. This slide has all the links for the third-party vendor resources that I mentioned earlier in the presentation. We've reached the end of this presentation. I hope you enjoyed it. Please share the good news with me when you pass the exam. I'd love to hear feedback on whether this presentation proved helpful to your studies. Finally, you should always be working to strengthen your professional network. So, if you'd like to connect with me on LinkedIn, Twitter, or in the Trailblazer community, you can find those links on my YouTube channel's homepage. If you like this presentation, please feel free to subscribe to this channel to access more great content, including the sessions featured on this slide. Good luck on your exam, Trailblazer.